14 million people watched Colbert's final monologue on CBS. Fewer than 600 know what happened in the building between 2 p.m. and airtime. And only 3 people in the world have seen the document that CBS's general counsel slid across a conference table at 4:47 p.m. The document that turned a network's act of compliance into an act of defiance without changing a single word of the broadcast. Nobody in Studio 57 knows what is inside the sealed envelope sitting in the executive producer's desk drawer. Not the lighting director, who has already set the grid to a cold, flat wash he was not asked to set. Not the stage manager, who received a revised rundown at 3:15 p.m. with 4 segments replaced by a single block labeled only EP Discretion, Runtime TBD. Not even Colbert, who arrives at the building at 5:30 p.m., passes through the lobby without stopping at his dressing room, and walks directly to the executive producer's office, where he is handed a chair, a coffee, and a sentence that will restructure the next 6 hours of his life. CBS isn't killing the segment. CBS is airing everything, and legal has approved something you need to read before you go to the desk. 9:22 a.m., 14 hours before broadcast. A courier delivers a letter to the CBS television headquarters at 1515 Broadway. The letter bears the seal of the White House Office of Communications. It is addressed to the president of CBS News and Entertainment. It is 4 paragraphs long. Paragraph 1 references ongoing concerns regarding the editorial direction of late-night programming on the CBS broadcast network. Paragraph 2 cites the network's broadcast license renewal, scheduled for the following fiscal year. Paragraph 3 contains a sentence that the network's general counsel will later describe, in a sealed deposition, as the most explicit threat of regulatory retaliation I have encountered in 31 years of broadcast law. The sentence reads, "Continued tolerance of programming that undermines public confidence in the institutions of government is inconsistent with the public interest obligations upon which your license depends." Paragraph 4 requests a meeting. 9:47 a.m. The letter reaches the general counsel's office. She reads it once. She reads it again. She picks up her phone and calls the network president. The call lasts 3 minutes. At 9:51 a.m., a conference room on the 32nd floor is booked under a project code that does not correspond to any active production. 10:15 a.m., 6 people are seated in the conference room. Network president, general counsel, head of standards and practices, head of regulatory affairs, VP of communications. 1 outside counsel, a First Amendment specialist retained 18 months ago under a contingency agreement that no one expected to activate. The letter sits in the center of the table. 6 copies, 6 identical readings. The outside counsel speaks first. She identifies the operative sentence in paragraph 3. She identifies the legal mechanism it implies. Not a direct threat of license revocation, but an indirect one, channeled through the language of public interest obligations, designed to create pressure without creating a paper trail that could survive judicial review. "This letter is scaffolding," she says. "It is not the building, but it tells you exactly what shape the building is going to be." The present, 11:35 p.m. Broadcast begins. Colbert takes the stage. His walk is fast. No pause. No physical negotiation with the space. He reaches the desk in 11 strides, sits, adjusts his glasses with his left hand, and locks onto the camera with an expression that carries 0 warmth and absolute precision. The band plays 4 bars. Colbert cuts them off with a raised hand. The music stops. The studio goes silent. A woman in the 3rd row presses her back into her seat. "Tonight's show is going to be different," Colbert says. "I need you to know that before we start. Not different funny, just different." 11 a.m., 13 hours before broadcast. The conference room on the 32nd floor. The general counsel presents 2 options. Option 1, comply, pull the evening's political content, issue Colbert revised guidelines, document the changes internally, file the documentation in the network's regulatory correspondence archive, proceed to the license renewal without incident. Option 2 is not yet on the table. The network president asks the outside counsel to leave the room. She leaves. The door closes. 4 minutes pass. The door reopens. The outside counsel is invited back. The network president says 7 words. What does option 2 look like legally? The present. 11:38 p.m. Colbert opens a folder. The folder contains the White House letter. He holds it at chest height. Camera 2 frames the seal, the eagle, the arrows, the olive branch, the words "The White House" in a typeface that 61 million screens can read without magnification. Colbert does not read the letter, not yet. He holds it and looks at the audience. This letter was delivered to CBS headquarters this morning. It was sent by the White House. It was addressed to the president of this network, and it contains a direct instruction to silence this show. He sets the letter on the desk. He places both palms on top of it. CBS was given two choices: comply and keep the license safe, refuse and face whatever comes next. He pauses. 1 second. 2. CBS chose option 2. I found out 3 hours ago. A man in the 6th row leans forward until his elbows hit his knees. His hands lock behind his neck. A woman near the aisle grips her armrest with her right hand and does not release it for the next 4 minutes. 12:30 p.m., 11 hours before broadcast. The outside counsel presents option 2. Option 2 is not refusal. Option 2 is architecture in reverse, scaffolding the network's legal position so that the act of airing Colbert's show becomes, itself, a protected act of editorial discretion documented in real time. The general counsel drafts a memorandum. The memorandum states that CBS has reviewed the White House letter and has determined that compliance with its implicit request would constitute a voluntary surrender of editorial independence inconsistent with the network's obligations under the First Amendment and the Communications Act. The memorandum further states that the network will broadcast its regularly scheduled programming without alteration. The memorandum is signed by the general counsel, countersigned by the network president, and time-stamped at 1:14 p.m. At 1:22 p.m., the general counsel makes a decision that no one in the room expects. She orders a second document prepared, a cover letter addressed to the FCC chairman, attaching the White House letter as an exhibit and formally notifying the commission that CBS has received what the cover letter describes as an attempt to exert extra-legal influence over broadcast content through the implied threat of license action. The cover letter requests that both documents be entered into the network's license renewal file as a matter of public record. At 2:00 p.m., both documents are complete. At 2:47 p.m., they are sent by registered courier to the FCC. At 3:15 p.m., Colbert's executive producer receives a call from the general counsel. The call lasts 7 minutes. At 3:23 p.m., the executive producer revises the rundown. The present, 11:41 p.m. The screen behind Colbert fills with the White House letter. Full text, all 4 paragraphs. The operative sentence in paragraph 3 is highlighted. Colbert reads it aloud. His voice is rapid, flat, stripped of inflection. The delivery of a man reading a legal instrument into a record, not a host performing for a camera. The sentence fills the studio the way a verdict fills a courtroom. When he finishes reading, he lets the silence hold for 5 seconds. Then he reads it again. The second reading is slower. The silence after it is longer. That sentence, Colbert says, is not a suggestion. It is not a concern. It is a threat delivered on presidential letterhead, using regulatory language calibrated to create maximum pressure while maintaining plausible deniability. He sets the page down. And the reason I know that is because the woman who identified it for CBS this morning has been practicing First Amendment law for 26 years, and when she read it, the first thing she said was, "This is scaffolding." The word detonates quietly. Scaffolding, structure erected around a building to change its appearance without altering its foundation. Scaffolding that allows work to be done at heights that would otherwise be dangerous. Scaffolding that comes down when the work is finished, leaving no evidence of what was built from behind it. A camera operator in the pit adjusts her angle and then stops adjusting, her hand frozen on the panhandle, her eyes locked on the monitor she is no longer reading. But here's what the White House didn't know when they sent this letter. Colbert picks up a second document. It is 3 pages, printed on CBS corporate letterhead. They didn't know that CBS would say no. They didn't know that CBS's general counsel would draft a memorandum of editorial independence and sign it before lunch. And they definitely didn't know that at 2:47 this afternoon, CBS sent a registered courier to the FCC with both documents, the White House letter and CBS's response, and requested that they be entered into the public record. He holds the CBS memorandum at chest height. Camera 2 frames the letterhead, the signature block, the timestamp. CBS didn't just refuse. CBS made the refusal permanent. It is in a file, it is in a government building, and it cannot be unsigned, unsent, or undone. A sound moves through the audience. Not a gasp, not a murmur, but something between the two. A collective exhale that carries the specific weight of people processing information that rearranges something they believed about how institutions behave under pressure. A man in the 4th row shakes his head slowly, not in disagreement, but in the involuntary motion of a person recalibrating. A woman 2 rows behind him presses her fingertips against her closed eyelids. Then the door beside the curtain opens. She enters without introduction. The outside counsel, the First Amendment specialist. She is mid-50s, wearing a navy suit and no jewelry, except a watch that she checks once as she reaches the edge of the stage. The gesture of someone who has been tracking time all day and cannot stop. She does not take the microphone. microphone. She stands at the boundary where the stage light meets the wing shadow and speaks with the precise diction of a person whose professional life is built on the weight of individual words. She describes the letter, not its content. Colbert has already read that. She describes its construction. She identifies the legal technique, implicit conditionality. The letter does not say, "If you continue, we will revoke your license." It says, "Continued tolerance is inconsistent with obligations upon which your license depends." The difference, she explains, is the difference between a threat and a trap. A threat can be challenged. A trap works by making the target believe that compliance is voluntary. "I have reviewed regulatory correspondence for 26 years, she says. I have seen pressure. I have seen persuasion. I have seen strongly worded suggestions. This is none of those things. This is a directive wearing the grammar of a request." She pauses. Her right hand moves to her left wrist and grips it. "I rehearsed walking away 6 times in the parking garage before I came inside. Not because I was afraid of this stage, because I was afraid that once I said this publicly, the scaffolding would become visible to everyone, and the people who built it would know exactly who pointed at it." Colbert watches her. The audience watches her. The silence has a density that makes the ambient hum of the air conditioning sound like roaring. A second person enters through the same door. He is younger, mid-30s, wearing a press credential he keeps touching with his left hand, flipping it forward and back against his chest. He is a former junior attorney in the FCC's Media Bureau who left the commission 5 months ago. His voice does not break. It arrives already at its lowest register, compressed, tight, the voice of a man who has been holding a specific set of facts inside his ribcage and is releasing them the way a diver releases air. Controlled, measured, knowing that the supply is finite. He describes a file, not the public file, a secondary tracking file maintained by the chairman's office for license renewals flagged as politically sensitive. The file is not classified. It is not restricted. It is simply unindexed, invisible to FOIA searches, invisible to congressional oversight requests, invisible to anyone who does not know it exists. He knows it exists because he built the database template. He built it in his 3rd month at the commission, working from specifications provided by the chairman's chief of staff. The specifications included a field labeled EOP contact, Executive Office of the President. His throat works. A visible contraction that the camera catches in close-up, the muscles beneath his jaw tightening and releasing twice before the words arrive. "Fear doesn't age well," he says. "It turns into something heavier, and I am done carrying it." The room fractures slowly. One person in the mezzanine stands. Her hands come together, not clapping, pressing, palms flat against each other, held at her sternum as though catching something falling through her chest. Then a clap. One, from the orchestra section. Another, the sound does not accelerate. It holds its frequency. Slow, deliberate, each impact a separate decision made by a separate person who has arrived at the same conclusion through a separate path. A man in the 8th row stands without clapping. He folds his arms across his chest and lifts his chin and stands there, vertical, present, refusing to sit while the truth is still standing at the edge of the stage. The clapping sustains for 15 seconds. It does not peak. It simply holds, the way a note holds when a finger stays on the key. Colbert lets it end on its own terms. His hands rest on the desk. His breathing is even. When the room settles into a silence that is no longer empty, but full of everything that has just been said and everything that the people who said it will face tomorrow, he speaks. "I want to be clear about what happened today. A letter was sent to this network telling it to silence this show. The letter came from the White House. It used the language of licensing to imply consequences for editorial independence. And CBS, the network I have spent the last decade making jokes about, arguing with, negotiating with, and occasionally cursing at in conference rooms with no windows. CBS read that letter, and instead of folding, they filed it. They filed it with the government. They filed the threat beside their refusal. And they did it before telling me." His voice drops. The register is barely audible past the 6th row. The balcony leans forward. "I have made a career out of holding institutions accountable. I did not expect an institution to hold itself accountable today, but that is what happened, and the scaffolding is visible now, not because I pulled it down, but because CBS refused to stand behind it." He picks up the White House letter. He picks up the CBS memorandum. He holds one in each hand, arms extended, the documents facing the camera like the 2 sides of a scale. "The scaffolding is coming down tonight, and what's underneath it doesn't look like a joke. It looks like the thing jokes are supposed to protect us from." He sets both documents on the table. He looks at the camera. 4 seconds. 5. The tally light burns. The silence holds. By 12:15 a.m., both documents are available on CBS's website as downloadable PDFs. By 12:30, they have been downloaded 1.4 million times. By 1 a.m., 3 networks have interrupted programming to broadcast the CBS memorandum beside the White House letter. Legal analysts on every cable channel are parsing the operative sentence. The phrase, "a directive wearing the grammar of a request," appears in 14 separate broadcasts within 90 minutes. The president's first post arrives at 1:47 a.m. It calls CBS disloyal to America. The second, at 2:23 a.m., calls the broadcast an illegal leak of confidential government correspondence. The third, at 3:15 a.m., threatens total review of all CBS licenses nationwide. Each post is longer than the last. Each is louder. Each is placed beside the CBS memorandum by thousands of users simultaneously, and the juxtaposition sharpens with every post. On one side, a legal document signed by 2 officers of a publicly traded company, time-stamped, couriered, filed with a federal agency by 3 p.m. on a weekday afternoon. On the other, a man alone with a phone, his sentences fraying, his capital letters multiplying, writing at a speed that has outrun his ability to construct an argument that the documents on the other side of the screen do not already dismantle. At 3:02 a.m., a wire service receives an anonymous communication from inside the FCC. 1 page, internal letterhead. The communication confirms the existence of the secondary tracking file. It confirms the EOP contact field. It confirms that CBS's license renewal was flagged as politically sensitive 6 weeks before the White House letter was sent. The wire service verifies the letterhead. The scaffolding is no longer inference, it is inventory, and the inventory is now in 3 locations: a network's legal department, a federal agency's public file, and 61 million screens that have not gone dark. The story does not resolve, it propagates. Congressional offices demand access to the secondary file. The FCC's Inspector General announces a preliminary review. Former commissioners appear on morning broadcasts using words, scaffolding, geometry, architecture, that did not belong to this conversation 7 days ago, and now define it. The White House letter sits in a government file beside CBS's refusal. The 2 documents will remain there through the license renewal, through the hearings, through whatever comes next. They are permanent, they are public. And every person who reads them will understand that the scaffolding was real, that it was built to do exactly what Colbert said it was built to do, and that the only reason it is visible tonight is because one network decided that the cost of taking it down was less than the cost of standing behind it. If this changed how you see power, hit subscribe. If it didn't, watch it again. The details you missed the first time are the ones that matter most. Notifications on. Next one drops soon.